tonight, and warning, distressing footage coming up. Distressing, that is, for Penny Wong as well, who's embarrassed as this footage emerges of hostages hidden by Palestinian terrorists in a Gaza hospital. An anti-Jewish hatred is off the scales as even a man in his 70s is now attacked outside his synagogue. I'll talk to his son. Plus an update on the former Australian diplomat who told us he'd starve to death in front of Parliament House if we didn't stop coal exports. Turns out he was full of hot air. And the Victorian Liberals, proof on Saturday that they're probably going nowhere, really. But first, media outlets on the left are going soft on this story. Protecting Labor, maybe, I don't know. But Anthony Albanese's silence until a few hours ago, when he was forced out of hiding, his silence on an attack by a Chinese warship that last week injured sailors of the Royal Australian Navy, is such a scandal. I mean, it shows a devastating lack of leadership and a bit of dishonesty, I've got to admit. It shows our Prime Minister is being played for a fool by the Chinese dictatorship, which is wiping its boots on him and on Australia. Last Tuesday, a Chinese warship closed in on one of our frigates, HMAS Toowoomba, as it sort of wallowed in international waters in Japan's exclusive economic zone. It was disabled. It had a fishing net wrapped around its propeller. Well, the Toowoomba had Navy divers in that water trying to cut the net free, and it told the Chinese destroyer to back off, told them what was wrong. Instead, that Chinese destroyer, despite knowing we had divers in the sea, kept coming and sounded its sonar in a deliberately aggressive act. And those pulses injured the eardrums of at least one diver, who had to, all of them had to scramble out of the water to save themselves from something even more serious. Now, this was an attack on our Navy and on our sailors, and probably the first time China had deliberately injured our defence forces since the Korean War. Yet, for the next 4 days, the Albanese government said nothing, not publicly, kept the whole thing secret. And the question is, why? I mean, it's certainly a question the opposition is asking. And it wasn't until Saturday, which is a graveyard for any news that isn't sport, only on Saturday, 4 days later, did Defence Minister Richard Marles slip out a press release that revealed the attack and criticised China quite mildly for what he called its unsafe and unprofessional conduct, as if it was somehow not quite deliberate. Now, why might Richard Marles have sat on this news for 4 days? And I think the answer is pretty obvious and very damning. It was to save Albanese's face. It was to stop voters from seeing the Prime Minister's supposed new friendship with China's dictator is a fraud. He's just being played for a fool on his foreign trips. And let's consider the timeline. 1 week before this Chinese attack, on Tuesday on the Toowoomba, 1 week before, Albanese was in Beijing, soaking up the Chinese dictatorship's flattery and its spin, letting it all go to his head.
People were saying that we have a handsome boy coming from Australia.
Now, a chuffed Albanese emerged from all this ego massaging to declare that diplomacy is back and our relations with China, they were stabilising under his way of handling the dictator.
That we're upfront, that we're respectful, that we deal through diplomacy. The engagement that I've had with China, with President Xi, have been positive.
Yet just 1 week after that, peace in our time, last Tuesday, that Chinese destroyer injured our sailors on the HMS Toowoomba. The Chinese had played Albanese like a fiddle. But Albanese's embarrassment then was even worse, you see, because Tuesday turned out to be exactly the wrong day for him to tell Australians about this attack. So he didn't. You see, Albanese was going on another trip the very next day to San Francisco, to the APEC meeting there. Now, there he would and did again meet President Xi. He wanted to chat to him about this and that and act like best friends, just like Albanese has somehow solved our trouble with China, fixed the trade problems, shown he was much better at this diplomacy game than that stupid Scott Morrison. So how could Albanese at the same time have a confrontation with Xi? Say, hey, President Xi, why are you attacking my Navy, without looking like he'd been a sucker all along? How could he get away even with posing for pictures, even handing his phone to Ambassador Kevin Rudd for some more snaps for his social media when there was this crisis that he should be fixing? Because let's be honest, if there's something Albanese really loves about his job, it's getting selfies of himself with celebrities and bigwigs like these at APEC. But keeping the Toowoomba attack secret, that turned out to be absolutely perfect. Albanese could do all that and meet President Xi as if everything was still sweet, and without the media on his back saying, why didn't you shirt front him? Did you see what he's just done to our Navy? All sweet. So on Friday, this is now 3 days after the attack, which was still secret, Albanese told journalists, no worries, he'd met with Xi and told him their meeting in Beijing 2 weeks ago, that had been a big success at home.
I reiterated to him that it was a very positive visit that was well received in Australia.
So not once in all this spin about how things were so brilliant now between China and Australia, did Albanese mention the Toowoomba attack? Certainly not publicly. And he didn't demand answers from Xi. It was only as he flew home, cocooned in his RAF jet, that his government finally revealed that Toowoomba had been attacked. But then it was, of course, too late for the media and for Australians to expect Albanese to go up to China's dictator and say to his face that this attack on the Toowoomba was enemy action. But that said, this has become now a scandal. Albanese wouldn't comment yesterday, didn't show his face, but today he decided he'd better get out ahead of this story that was getting away from him by giving an interview to Sky News. I have to say it was a joke. Yes, Albanese himself did finally criticise the Chinese attack, but again, mildly.
This was dangerous, it was unsafe and unprofessional.
Unprofessional, seriously. But what he wouldn't say, and I'm sure he couldn't say, was that he had said all this to the dictator's face back in San Francisco.
Accusations you didn't raise it with the Chinese leadership in San Francisco. Can you clear that up?
Well, we've raised it very clearly through all of the normal channels. I don't talk about private meetings on the sidelines, discussions I have with any world leader.
The normal channel seems to me like, let's just tell the ambassador, let's send him a little note. Oh, we're a little bit upset. You know, what did you do, Prime Minister? And this excuse, how ludicrous for not telling us straight that he didn't confront President Xi about this Chinese attack. Oh, I can't talk about that. Can't talk about conversations with world leaders. In fact, he can and he does, as he did in Beijing, telling us at huge length about all the stupid nonsense and chit-chat he'd discussed with President Xi the time before. Just, you know, empty gossip like he was some kind of starstruck tourist too scared to say boo.
President Xi relayed stories about his visits to Australia, including we had an exchange about, he spoke about the Tasmanian devils as being cute animals in Australia. I pointed out that whilst I like Tasmanian devils, they're probably not as cute as pandas.
So Albanese will tell us, oh, he talked about Tasmanian devils and pandas and red wine and all that. But he won't talk to the dictator about China hurting our sailors. And you tell me how this is good for Australia. And the message that I'm sure China is getting out of this is Albanese is weak. The message is China can even attack his navy, and Albanese will be too scared of the bad publicity to even mention it. Well, not directly. And it's worked. Worked for China. I mean, China bullied Australia for years, and now it has a Prime Minister who'll just suck it up. And if Albanese can't see how dangerous that is, he really isn't fit to be Prime Minister, because we need a leader and not some selfie-taking tourist chatting about the cute pandas he's seen on his travels. Joining me is the panel, Michael Kroger, former Victorian Liberal President, Stephen Connery, former Labor Senator and Cabinet Minister. Michael, What does this tell you? Keeping secret China's attack on one of our warships and its sailors so that he doesn't have to confront China's president?
I think this guy's just out of his depth, isn't he? I think the more we see of Albanese, he's just not done the hard work over the years to work out how you behave as Prime Minister. So twists and turns and nuance and chicanery. I think he might be really out of his depth, and it showed with his hopeless performance over The Voice. I mean, Hawke or Keating would never have done that. They would never have been led by the nose by extreme Aboriginal leadership. He's been passable on the Israel situation, but home, well, from socialists, just passable. I mean, he hasn't been out there condemning Hamas and condemning anti-Semitism to the extent he should have been. And this sort of stuff with the Chinese, it's all too tricky. And in foreign policy, you get found out. So I just wonder whether he's out of his depth. I wonder whether he's up to the job. Doesn't appear to me that he is.
Fancy that you use FaceTime with the Chinese president to talk about pandas and whether New Zealand red wine is better than Australia, but you don't happen to mention, oh, by the way, one of your ships attacked our sailors.
Look, I think, Andrew, that you're confusing the two types of conversations. The panda conversation was after a formal meeting, formally agreed discussion points, not an on the sidelines discussion. So he's quite right to say, when you pull people aside, you have the chat. That's a confidential conversation. When you have the formal meetings and everyone's agreed what we're going to talk about and everyone knows that's what's going to be talked about, then you have that conversation. So don't make them sound like they're the same thing, because they're not.
I really admire you, Stephen. I tell you what, if I'm on trial for my life, I want you. Yeah. I want you. But listen, let me give you a point of difference. Tony Abbott said he was going to shirt front Vladimir Putin. He did it, and he told us about it. This is serious. Why didn't Albanese shirt front the Chinese president and tell us about it?
Let's be clear. The Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison governments made a hash of our relationship with our biggest trading partner. They managed to achieve nothing with China and at the same time get a whole range of our tradable items outrageously banned by China.
My question was why he didn't say it.
What Albo has been able to do with Penny is actually get us back on a stable footing and get most of our goods back in without conceding a thing.
Without conceding a thing. Michael, the thing that he just conceded was, oh, you can attack our warships and hurt our sailors, and don't worry, President Xi, mum's the word. I mean, seriously, that's what he conceded.
I don't think you'd accuse Albo of being strong in international affairs. I mean, he's just tiptoeing into these relationships. Look, Xi is a master. He's toying. If when they say to him, we've got the Australian Prime Minister Albanese coming in to see you, Xi must think, oh, well, that's an hour of my life I'll never get back. I mean, he's just toying with Albo. This guy's one of the great political masters of our generation. President.
But let me tell you, on that point, Stephen, I know you're not going to bag Albanese, although seriously, this is subpar. This is embarrassing. The bigger picture is this: China can have you come in. The president can smile on you.
Absolutely.
The premier can call you handsome boy, and pledge eternal peace, and the very next week they go and do this.
Absolutely. I've said consistently on the show, Andrew, and I know you've always made the point that I have, that you don't believe what China says. They can say anything kind to you in the world they want. You just watch what they do. They don't keep their word. They deliberately have militarised islands. They're the masters, as Michael's just described, playing what we call the grey zone war, where they don't do anything that's just across the line of actual military conflict, but they'll do things like fire chaff in front of planes. They'll shine lasers into pilots' eyes. They'll fire sonar bursts to potentially scare off / in this case injure Australian sailors. And you don't believe the words that they say. They are not a good international partner. It is a dictatorship, and Xi is increasingly exerting.
Prime Minister Stephen Conroy said, I don't think it would have been nothing. I don't think it would have been nothing. That's not your character. Seriously.
No.
But listen, obviously, this is a free kick from the Liberal Party point of view, but I said a week ago that I thought something snapped in Albanese, right? I thought his leadership was now in crisis. It's not obvious to many people, but I think his confidence was gone, his focus was gone, his authority was gone because of his loss on the voice, and I didn't see many things going for him, the economy or whatever. I think it's in crisis, and now this. What do you make of it?
Look, he's diminished as a leader after the voice. I mean, they did some good things electorally early on, all washed away by his obsession with the voice, being led down this garden path by, as I said, the extreme leadership of the Aboriginal movement. He couldn't get out of it. He wouldn't get out of it. He wouldn't stand up to them. Now he's got to deal with the Makarrata Commission and the treaty as well, by the way. We haven't got to that yet. And then the Republic. It's another popular move. He's lost his confidence. He's lost his agenda. And when you think that the issues over the next year are going to be cost of living, the economy and national security, this is not his turf. These are not his issues. His issues are something entirely different. So I think he's in a lot of trouble. If he loses 12 seats, he'll certainly lose his majority at the next election. Okay, there's no doubt about that. He's on 78. If he loses 3, he'll at least lose 6. If he loses 12, Dutton is on 67 and he's on 66. So if he loses 12 seats, Dutton will probably end up Prime Minister. I can easily see there's 6 you'd write off straight away, 1 in Victoria, Tasmania and 2 in New South Wales and Western Australia. So there's 6 gone. I've got another 14 where I think he'd be in serious trouble. So while a month ago I thought, well, it's been 100 years since, this bloke's in serious trouble. He's a diminished figure. He's got a fight on turf, which is him playing away. They're not his issues, and the dogs are barking.
And I'm taking a piece of that.
Yeah,
Michael Kroger, what is it? It's 20th of November. Peter Dutton's going to be leader after the next Prime Minister after the next election.
Dutton has
At
a chance.
dinner at Florentine.
He has a chance.
Dinner. You're paying if Peter Dutton's not the Prime Minister after the next election. I pay if he
Dutton
is.
has a chance of winning.
Okay, I want a piece of that action, Michael.
Well,
that is as far-fetched as it
More
gets.
seats than Labor.
I'm putting my money where my mouth is, Michael.
More
Are you?
seats than
Well,
Labor.
tell us how it could turn it around. Tell us how it could turn it around, because there are all these problems, right?
Well, firstly, Peter Dutton offers nothing on any of those. Nothing on cost of living, nothing on inflation.
The theory is
nothing whatsoever.
lose elections, oppositions don't win it. I think Peter Dutton's
but the
one
Australian public have
away
met
from looking.
Yeah, the Australian public have
like
met
an
Peter
alternative
Dutton.
government, but I think
they know
first
exactly
of
who
all,
Peter Dutton is.
Well, I don't know. I think Albanese has played him in. Albanese has made immigration for some reason, for miscalculation, an issue last week. That's Dutton's home turf. Dutton, the people
a Liberal
think
Party
it's too tough
failed
and
policy,
nasty.
a failed Liberal Party policy, the court's overturned,
and national
is
security,
somehow Labor's
that's
fault.
what you want. No, I'm just saying.
A High Court overturned a failed Liberal policy and it's Labor's fault.
It is Labor's fault for not preparing for it, as you well know.
Did the Libs have their legislation?
Allowing 80 criminals
Did the Libs have their legislation ready to go?
without having got
Absolutely
anything
not.
ready to save the community. It's just
Absolutely
astonishing.
not. This is a failed Liberal Party policy. The High Court has overturned.
It wasn't a failed Labor
On Peter
Liberal
Dutton's
policy.
head. This is a Peter Dutton policy that's failed.
Mate, I
We
feel
need more
sorry
advice
for you
from
having
Peter
to- I feel so sorry for you having to reach into the bottom of the bucket to try and find something. They're in look, the point is, they're in so
I think if an
much
election
trouble.
was held today, there's a chance that we would be a minority government. But an election isn't being held today. An election is being held
You
in
go
18
around it.
months.
There's right at the
18
centre
months'
of it,
time.
a throbbing
18
Albanese
months'
is not up to the
time.
job, and you won't talk
The
about it.
economy will not be under the same sort of pressure from inflation, from interest rates. That will have begun to turn around
punch drunk.
long
Stephen,
before the
electricity
next
prices,
election.
electricity
He's
prices.
punch drunk.
No,
He's
I think
punch
so.
drunk. He's lost
Listen
his voice.
Well, I'm
quickly,
looking forward
not
to
make
dinner.
it
I know
too
what I'm
easy.
ordering, Michael. So
Victorian Liberals, right? How unelectable are they? You had Premier Daniel Andrews quitting politics last month. By-election was on Saturday. While the Labor Party lost 11 points from Andrews' huge votes at the last election, Liberals picked up less than half of that.
Look, the Victorian Parliamentary Liberal Party have won one election in 27 years.
Ooh.
So it tells you something, and that is this, that you need some strong policy positions to define yourself. Not since Jeff Kennett and Alan Stockdale run Victoria, who for the parliamentary party in Victoria, had strong policy positions, enough to convince the electorate that we stand for something which compels people to vote for us. And that's John Pesutto's challenge. And I hope the lesson of almost 3 decades of defeat, apart from the one victory that Ted Baillieu had in 2010, it tells them something. define some very strong policy positions in order to win government.
Except
Liberals' primary vote was 21%.
That's
A
terrible.
10% swing against Labor. Liberals' primary vote's 21%. And they talk about they're going to win the next election in Heartland Labor seats.
There was an independent.
Heartland Labor
Yeah,
seats.
well, still.
21% of the
The
vote.
independent got.
Yeah, but if you run second, a third, behind even the independent, that's pretty.
Well, we
that's
reckon
pretty
second
shoddy.
and preferences.
Yeah, I know. After preferences. Michael Krog, Stephen Conroy, thank you both
Thanks,
for
Andrew.
your time.
Thanks, Andrew.
After the break, look, I got to say, I'm getting ashamed of being Australian. I mean, this Jew hatred here is a scandal, an international scandal, really. I talked to the son of the latest victim, a 72-year-old man attacked outside his synagogue. Plus an update on the climate extremists who came on my show and said he'd never eat again unless the government gave in to him. Well, it's all ended in a bit of a sad farce. There's a possible breakthrough for at least some of the hostages that the Hamas terrorist group took in its bloody raid on Israel on October 7. But before I get to that, Foreign Minister Penny Wong keeps embarrassing herself and the country over this war, Israel's war with Hamas, which runs Gaza. Hamas obviously starting the war by slaughtering 1,200 Jews and taking all those hostages. Now, on Friday again, Wong warned Israel not to attack hospitals in Gaza. They had to be protected, she said. She said Australia is deeply concerned by attacks in and around hospitals in Gaza. But as I have kept showing you, many of those hospitals were in fact used by Hamas to store weapons and to fire them at Israelis. And on this weekend, last weekend, more evidence of that and more from Gaza's main hospital, the Shifa. There's not just the weapons there that I showed you last week, even stuff behind MRI units. Now, a warning, this is distressing footage. There's this bit's not distressing, a tunnel just outside the hospital, joining it to the network of tunnels that Hamas has dug under Gaza to hide its terrorists and its weapons. Doesn't build bomb shelters for civilians. It wants them to stay above ground and die, but it has got tunnels for its terrorists. With the Israelis actually following this one all the way down to a blast-proof door with a firing hole, which it didn't dare open. But more than that, here comes that footage. The Israelis seized CCTV footage from the hospital's main entrance, footage from October 7. This is the day of the Hamas attack on Israel. And it found footage of terrorists rushing in one of the hostages they took. They knew exactly where they were going to. They're running the guy, so I don't think he's injured. The hospital orderly there, clearly wanting no part of this. And then another hostage brought in on a stretcher. And now bodies of two other hostages, both of them women, have been found in houses a street or two away from the hospital. But in the hospital car park that day, more evidence. Israeli military vehicles that Hamas had captured in Israel on October 7, driven to the hospital car park. Now, why would they drive Israeli military vehicles to this hospital? Joining me from Israel for the latest on this war is Ariel Ozeran, who's a former analyst with the Israeli Intelligence Corps. He's now a reporter with ITV. Ariel, thanks for coming on the show again. I keep seeing journalists here, saying, we're sceptical of Israeli evidence. I saw a slash on one of our shows. Israel claims there's a tunnel. We're actually seeing the tunnel right with our own eyes. But they report with a straight face, Hamas saying, no, of course we don't use hospitals. What do you make of the evidence?
Right, Andrew. It's more than that. It's every time someone mentions numbers of casualties or any information coming out of Gaza, you have to remember that all the government officials, all the government bodies in Gaza are run by Hamas. So if journalists are willing to apply the highest levels of scrutiny to facts coming out from the IDF organization that has been working with media for years, and its credibility has been proven time after time again, it would behoove these media outlets to show that same level of scrutiny to official numbers, we should say, coming out of the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. That isn't the case. And what the IDF has been showing consistently over the past few weeks, mainly over the past 6 days, as it's been operating in Shifa Hospital, the biggest of Gaza's 35 hospitals. They showed, as you just showed, a tunnel shaft going underground, connecting to a vast underground complex of hundreds of miles of underground tunnels. I mean, these facts, they're shown to the public at face value. The fact that people still choose to deny or undermine those facts, that is unfortunate. But what continues to come out from Gaza, and this is not only from Shifa Hospital, this is multiple hospitals. Even before that, there was the Rentisi Hospital, children's hospital in northern Gaza, that in an underground basement under the hospital, they found a chair that an Israeli hostage was tied to. They found the ropes that bound her to the chair. I say her because above the head was a baby's bottle, and that indicates that that chair was being used for breastfeeding a baby, a hostage baby. Israel there are over 236 hostages currently held in Gaza by Hamas, but not only, also Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and also other crime families that simply sent in their people during the chaos of October 7th, kidnapped as many as they could, and are now holding them hostages. Over 30 minors, children, and teens. And as you mentioned, this is something that Israel is trying to work on a hostage deal to release, but this is very, very challenging, and there are many actors involved, not just Israel, Hamas.
Yeah, well, there are now reports, as you say, Israel could make a deal with Hamas for, well, we're told maybe a 5-day humanitarian ceasefire in exchange for perhaps dozens of hostages, which is a better deal than Hamas was offering at first, 1 or 2 for a ceasefire. It's under pressure, so now it's dozens maybe. Women and children, we're told. What are the details that are confirmed, and how close do you think any deal is?
Well, the sad fact, Andrew, is that no details are confirmed. That's how we're conducting ourselves in this reality, constantly changing. Now, there are rumors because there's different elements. I mean, just like I said, it's not Israel, Hamas. It's Israel, Hamas, Qatar, the U.S. The videos of the 2 hostages that you showed being rushed into Shifa Hospital. One was Thai and another was Nepalese. And you have a lot of governments involved. But as far as my understanding is, what Israel is placing at the top priority are women and children, and not separating families. That is the initial demand. On the other side, the demand is also the release of Palestinian female prisoners, as well as terrorists who carried out attacks against Israelis. Add to that also thousands of liters of fuel, which is considered the lifeline of Hamas, because just like we said, everything that comes out of Gaza is from Hamas. Also, everything that goes into Gaza gets to Hamas in one way or another, and that makes the support of hospitals challenging. I will just note that, first of all, these hospitals being used for terror activity, that is a war crime, but also the fact that you're saying what kind of details of a deal are being talked. The best deal is for Hamas to simply give up all the hostages, and then there will be an immediate ceasefire.
Just surrender.
And these are hostages.
Ariel,
hostages,
they just need to surrender.
Hostages.
The quickest way for this to end, they surrender, give the hostages, they leave. That is the quickest way. Why protesters aren't demanding it? They say Hamas doesn't represent the people of Palestine. Then say, Hamas, surrender. That's the quickest way. Ariel Lozeran, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it.
Of missing hostages.
There is
that's inexplicable.
There is an agenda here. There's an anti-Israel and anti-Jewish agenda to many of these protests, and you know it, I know it. Thank you so much for your time. In fact, on that point, by the way, anyone marching with people chanting "Free, Free Palestine" should ask themselves, should they really be marching in a crowd where so many people there seem to be just Jew haters or people who encourage Jew hatred? I mean, there is a link, maybe, I think. And you've got to ask yourself this, please, if you're a protester, because the bullying of Jews in Australia, the threatening, the intimidation is now an international scandal. Tonight, I'm going to give you another shocking example. Already we've seen, of course, Jewish shops tagged, as the Nazis used to tag shops, apartments with Jews in Melbourne singled out for a tag, kill the Jews. We've had Muslim mobs scream insults and attack Jews outside a synagogue in Jewish Caulfield. You've had 4 Jewish boys allegedly threatened with murder for showing an Israeli flag. A man in his 60s cycling in Melbourne's Chapel Street with an Israeli flag, knocked off his bike, punched, kicked. Plus, in images that went round the world, Australia's shame, a mob at the Sydney Opera House chanting, "Gas the Jews," and a warning, this is distressing. And now the latest example, joining me from Melbourne, is Anton, who doesn't dare give us his surname. That's the kind of country this now is. Anton, thank you so much for your time. Your father is 72, so an attack on a man that age is no small thing. What happened to him?
Well, Andrew, yes, the attack was shocking. My dad, he was simply walking to the synagogue when the assailant parked behind him and exited his vehicle. He approached my dad's vehicle, looked inside, and he noticed that he has Jewish calendars with Hebrew writing. And at that point, he quickly rushed back to his own car, retrieved a syringe, and then ran towards my dad to attack him.
Anton, you said a syringe. That's amazing. That's a weapon.
It is a weapon. It's shocking. I couldn't believe it. When my dad told me what happened, I just couldn't believe it. Thankfully, my dad had the strength to defend himself. He fell to the ground on his back. He was kicking and screaming and fighting for his life.
Anton, How hurt was he?
Well, it was more about not being hurt. He seems okay, but it's more about he's been traumatized mentally. He's scared for this to happen again to himself or to anyone in the community. He's just traumatized. He hasn't slept since the incident.
Well, I'm not surprised. Have you got any doubt at all that this was an attack because he was Jewish?
I have absolutely no doubt. The fact that the assailant looked into my dad's car at first and then saw the Jewish calendars and then raced back to attack sends a clear message that this was anti-Semitic and this was a racially fueled crime attack.
Now, police are investigating it. Do you feel this attack was a bit of a one-off, your father was just unlucky, or are you starting to think that, well, this is actually part of something much bigger?
Well, as you know, Andrew, what's happening in the world at the moment, and I hope this is a once-off and it's not going to happen again, but unfortunately, I don't believe that. I think this will happen again. And the Jewish community needs to be aware, which is why I decided to speak out and really get this message across. The Jewish community needs to know what happened. They need to know a weapon was used, and they need to stay safe. They need to stay vigilant to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else.
Well, Anton, these are grim times. I guess going out on the street with Jewish insignia, Jewish clothing. This is something a lot of Jews in Australia will be reconsidering now. Wouldn't that be the case?
Unfortunately, I believe that is the case. I believe that's what's going to happen. People are going to be scared to walk out the door and practice their faith, or just to walk in public, like you said, with a Jewish symbol, a Star of David, or anything. It's shocking that in Australia in the year 2023, we're experiencing such anti-Semitic behaviour. My family, we came here from Russia in 1992 to escape anti-Semitism. And to be honest, my parents told me they never experienced physical anti-Semitism there compared to what's happening now. It's just shocking. Shocking.
That is a shocking story. Honestly, Australia's reputation in the world must look like trash with the sort of news we're getting now, this persecution. It's just disgusting. My best to your father and to your family. Thank you so much for your time, Anton.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
Like I say, this Jew hatred on our street really is, it's so shameful. Former Prime Minister John Howard has now said just that at the Central Synagogue in Bondi. He feels shame too at what's going on. If only the current Prime Minister would speak as powerfully as John Howard did.
And I am, as an Australian, I am ashamed at what your community has been subjected to over the past few weeks. And I get angry whenever I hear my country being denigrated. And when I read stories of discrimination against Jewish people, where I hear stories of schools telling their students not to wear their uniforms outside the school ground.
Don't you miss leadership like that? I should give you an update on the climate alarmists I had on my show a week or so ago. Gregory Andrews was once an Australian ambassador to no fewer than 9 African countries, God help us, and this month went on a hunger strike in front of Parliament House, threatened to starve himself to death if the Prime Minister didn't give in to his absurd demands.
Stop coal and gas exports. Stop fossil fuel subsidies. Stop chopping down our native forests. Until those demands are met, I'll be here every day at Parliament House and I won't eat anything.
Well, typical global warming extremist, the moral exhibitionist, moral bully, no follow-through. And the way he loaded his daughter with the guilt of urging him to die for the planet?
My daughter is with me
you're telling her she hasn't got a future.
110%.
Well, as I predicted, Gregory Andrews didn't actually go the distance. The Prime Minister, for a start, kept zipping off overseas without answering any of Andrews' letters and texts. And on day 16, despite the support of a gaggle of minor clerics and salvation seekers, Andrews was taken to hospital and called off his strike. But get this fakery. He's now handed his chalkboard to other climate extremists who carry on his hunger strike, which they claim is now on day 19, even though they themselves have had plenty of tucker in that time. That seems to be a cheat. Global warmers, so they wonder why so many of us don't treat them seriously or trust the word they say. After the break, the prominent psychiatrist who warns that doctors are giving in to the transgender lobby and hurting children. There's now so much politics, even in medicine, that children could get hurt, could even get mutilated. That's my word. In fact, 2 experienced psychiatrists have just published a paper in the journal Australasian Psychiatry warning fellow doctors not to give in to transgender activists and let politics get in the way of what is best for children who say they're confused about their sexual identity. One is Andrew Amos, who's an academic psychiatrist who's previously held a training role with Queensland's Health Department. Andrew Amos, thank you so much for joining me. What is worrying you? What is the danger to children here?
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here, and good to see John Howard back in action. Look, the major danger, I think,
sure was.
is that. Look, the major danger, I think, is that, as you say, there's an ideology in play here that has really taken over medicine. It's a specific area of medicine, but of course, it's an area where there are growing numbers of people affected, and there are also expanding ways, if you like, of the ideology. One of the things we showed in our paper is that if you rely upon what the doctors involved with gender clinics tell you themselves, you're really only getting half the picture. Our paper went out and had a look at some UK cases where the documents actually showed you how decisions were made and things like the influence of activists. So the conversations between the people in the clinics and then trans activists putting pressure on those people, and then the influence they had on the sorts of decisions that were being made. When you rely upon the medical literature, you're really relying upon what those doctors choose to tell you about what they're doing. So the advantage of our paper is by looking at legal documents where discovery means that you're forced to provide certain information. We could look under the veil, as it were. So our real concern then is that sort of evidence shows that institutes in Australia who use similar models to the UK Tavistock model, which is the one we looked at, are really probably doing the wrong thing. The major paradigm in medicine in Australia is what's called evidence-based medicine. The basic idea is, in order to provide a treatment, to provide medication, to do surgery, you actually want evidence that it's going to improve the health of the people that you're treating, not to cause them side effects, those sorts of things. I've had a pleasant weekend.
On that point, Andrew,
Okay.
can I, looking at your paper, it seems you're worried that children are being given really powerful hormonal drugs, a step towards changing their gender, despite a lack of evidence that changing gender actually helps ease their mental distress, which makes them think that this is what they should do. What is the state of the evidence then?
The state of the evidence is terrible. Look, I've actually spent the weekend going over the Royal Children's Hospital's Gender Service new released clinical guidelines. So clinical guidelines really are the blueprint for treatment in a particular area of medicine. And these are the clinical guidelines for transgender and gender diverse kids. From the very outset, the guidelines say, we really don't have any evidence for doing the things that we've been doing. We haven't done any of the gold standard treatment evidence, which is the randomized controlled trials. We're really relying on very low quality studies that were done almost a decade ago in many cases. So up front, those guidelines say we don't really have very good evidence. They then perform the trick of saying what we're going to do is we're going to rely upon clinician consensus. We're going to base our recommendations on the fact that everybody in this small room thinks that this is the right thing to do, even though we don't have evidence.
And the thing to me, it seems actually this works also on parents, a number of parents. Sometimes you look at the parents, you think, I'm not surprised that your child is confused about their gender. It seems, and I don't want to, look, there are genuine cases. I have a friend who's gone through the process. I admire her greatly. I'm putting that to one side. But I also suspect there are people who are just too scared of being called transphobic or not with the swing. There are also people feeding off the attention. Is that what you're seeing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the names that's been given to it is the contagion effect. One of the problems with not having a lot of evidence about it is we don't know how much that is contributing to the problem. And certainly that was what we saw in the Tavistock case. The UK High Court actually made a point of drawing attention to the fact that they really didn't know what the treatments were doing on the average to the patients that they saw, and they particularly didn't know what was happening to those patients after they left care. They're being put on a pathway, maybe starting with social transitioning, changing the way you look and those sorts of things, moving on to puberty blockers, which suppress the body's natural development along a particular masculine or feminine path, and then in many cases will go to surgeries, I think you had mentioned. So that's a very dangerous path to go down. What we put in the paper is the alternative for what's called gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming care simply assuming that what that child brings to you is an accurate picture of how they're going to be forever. Comprehensive care would look at all of the reasons that they're presenting with those sorts of problems and whether there might be much less invasive ways of treating. Yeah. And sorry, Andrew, you mentioned families. Sorry, you mentioned families.
Actually,
families,
I've gone through in the past. I've gone in the past to some of the problems that a lot of these children present with, and sometimes I think you might actually start with dealing with those problems before you get to changing their identity. Dr. Andrew Amos, I'm out of time. I'm going to have to get you back to talk about this some more. Thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. After the break, Meghan Markle is back, and it doesn't go well. Plus another ugly pro-Palestinian protest. Why are those protests more aggressive than the pro-Israel ones? I know I should be embarrassed, but I'm fascinated by Meghan Markle. There you go. Because to me, she's like a study in modern narcissism, very much a woman of the times. And she's finally re-emerged now to walk the red carpet at Variety's 2023 Power of Women dinner. Stunning, we were told, except, of course, she hogged the red carpet for so long, posing for the paparazzi, that an assistant had to try to move her along so the next people could have a go. But she just would not take a hint and brushed her away with a tight, bright smile. I mean, this is a woman who never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Joining me is Esther Kraku, writer, broadcaster, TV presenter, pundit. Is there anything she can't do? Esther, thank you so much for your time. Look, I know you probably don't share my fascination with Meghan Markle. What do you make of all this?
I do actually share your fascination with her because I'm very curious how her worldwide privacy tour is going while she's posing in front of the cameras at a Hollywood event. Meghan Markle is a bit of an enigma because she and her husband have always said that they wanted to be private citizens, that she's passionate about charity work and giving back. But now we hear that she's gearing up to do some more producing work and putting out content, which is in stark contrast to actually, you know, her humanitarian work that she said she was passionate about doing with the royal family. The fear is that she's going to put out work that's as preachy and sanctimonious as her and her husband. She's probably going to talk about climate change while she hops around to Katy Perry concerts in a private jet. She is an enigma in the sense that she's a walking contradiction, but it's very fascinating to watch because she and her husband lead the most ridiculous lives I think I've ever seen personally, and it's a shame that they're attached to the royal family in this way.
Yeah, it's a sign of how far she's fallen that she's actually got to fight for time on the red carpet and to avoid getting moved along. But anyway, Esther, more seriously, there's an ugly cultural difference, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, between the pro-Palestinian protests and the pro-Israel ones, regardless of the cause back at, in the war ground. Here is the latest pro-Palestinian protest here, just this afternoon outside the office of the New South Wales Premier.
They come here and bring this community together in Greece after seeing thousands.
No, but the ones, pro-Palestinian protests in Britain, I think, are actually far more intimidating. This one is in front of the office of your Labor leader, Keir Starmer, and this is what happened when prominent Conservative MP Michael Gove was dropped off near the Victorian station to catch a train, was spotted by pro-Palestinian protesters, forcing police to protect him. Have a look. Esther, what is going on? Why are those protests so much more aggressive than the pro-Israel ones?
Well, it's because, unfortunately, the pro-Palestinian protests have become a coalition between those who are genuinely concerned about the plight of the Palestinians and those who are just anti-Semitic and malicious and hateful and have no problem screaming hateful things on the streets of our capital. And it's really deeply unfortunate. I mean, if you look at the sort of pro-Israeli protests, they're more like vigils. You know, this is a nation that's been traumatized by the events of October the 7th, and they really just want to see peace in the region, however way people disagree on how to achieve that. But you have pro-Palestinian marches that are intimidating MPs. You know, we had basically a conscience vote in the Commons last week where they asked for a ceasefire, which obviously has no bearing on what the Israeli government chooses to do. It was just a symbolic vote. But you had people harassing MPs to the extent that MPs actually abstained from voting to have their views on the matter showed in one way or another. And it's really deeply unfortunate and concerning. Wow. I mentioned last week that Greta Thunberg's, congregation of the mentally unwell, where she talked about no climate justice on occupied land. And you're seeing elements of that ignorance and to a larger extent genuine malicious behaviour on a lot of pro-Palestinian protests. And it's so sad that London has effectively become the capital of anti-Israeli sentiment.
I know, it's just a vast demographic experiment that doesn't seem to be going too well because it's the left also there, I know, but gee, it's a sign of force on the streets that I think would intimidate a lot of politicians, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, and I think this is what this has become a reality check for the country. You know, people are saying there's been a rise in hate and anti-Semitism. There hasn't been a rise. They're just people that are feeling emboldened enough to display their views, and it's kind of shaken Britain to the core because it's made us realize actually we're living in a country with people that do not share our values, that hate this country, and it's a massive reality check. Obviously, the police has been not as helpful as they could have been. They've been seemingly quite biased in how they manage certain protests over others.
I know.
But really, this is a huge wake-up call for the country.
It's true. So true. Esther Kraku, thank you so much for your time. That's it from me. Coming up next, Chris Kenny. Good night.